Alright guys, so today I'm going to be bringing you a build that I have dubbed the Skulls McTank build. And it revolves around the Skulls MC gloves, which give you 16% increased bonus damage when no gear set bonuses are active. This is incentivizing gameplay that's based around high-end talents in particular, and I'm really excited to see what these do to the metagame of the division. That being said, this build is extremely strong and extremely efficient, so despite the fact that I can do some really cool stuff right now and build some really awesome, amazing potential builds on the PTS, I'm a little bit nervous to actually see what can be built in the live game because there's so many things that I haven't even gotten my hands on. I feel like there's so much potential with patch 1.5, but it's also a very, very dangerous patch because there's a lot of things that could break the game and become too strong too quickly. So to start off with, it's going to be utilizing the core mechanic of Skulls MC gloves, using that main talent, and then having LMG damage, 5.5% critical hit chance, and 14% critical hit damage. That's pretty much the god roll for the weapon that I'm going to be using, and that is the MG5, but I'll get more into that in a second. And then I'm using 4 pieces of high-end gear with 2 different pieces of gear set gear so that I can activate the 16% bonus damage because I have no active gear set talents. Now, a big shout out before I really get into the meat of this to Han Solo 21 for hooking me up with these gloves. He did get them from a named boss in the persistent world. I believe it was Fumes right around here. We do know for a fact that named bosses in the persistent world can drop these gloves as well as drop other named gear set pieces. These are different from the named weapons. They're now the equivalent in gear sets or in regular gear pieces to named weapons, and they are very, very strong. So keep that in mind every time you're farming. It'll be good to kill every named boss that you see in the open world. You can get these as a drop. That has been confirmed. Now, I'm going to talk about all 4 of my high-end pieces, then I'll talk about my 2 gear set pieces. I'll talk about my primary weapon. I don't really use my secondary, so it's not even worth discussing. Then I'll talk about my talents and my abilities and my skills and all the diversity that can be found there. And then I don't actually have any gameplay for you today, but there is a ton of it in our live streams. So I'll actually talk about where you can find that, why it's so good, and a little bit more about the mechanics that are going into, this build in general and why it is so strong. What you're seeing here right now on the primary stat, meters, is just the base level of efficiency. This is actually a lot weaker than the build actually is. Certain things are not reflected on this meter. Just to start off with, you have things like Booster Shot. If I do pop Booster Shot, you're going to see that my stats jump. And Booster Shot is active for a long duration. So things like that, other snapshotted bonuses are not reflected. What you're seeing when I have 460,000 toughness and I have just over 300,000 DPS is base level stats, and that's what you're going to be operating with as a bare minimum. So to get into the gear, just as a baseline, I'll talk about all this gear first before I really get into the meat of the mechanics. We have Vigorous. It's very important to run Vigorous. It allows your booster shot to overheal, and with the amount of skill power that you have utilizing a specific set of other mechanics, you're going to be able to do so pretty efficiently. You have a lot of skill power, you have low cooldowns, and you can heal yourself for a great deal. It's very efficient to have Vigorous, and I would recommend it over every other chest piece in the game, especially because you're not going to be using any gear set bonuses to proc the special talent on these Skulls MC gloves. Has a very high stamina roll. I've re-rolled it for that. You have armor as a major attribute. That's critical. You definitely want to have that. Even though Armor Shred has been implemented in patch 1.5, it's not very efficient as of right now on the PTS. It does make a difference. It is valuable. It does mean more damage to players directly, but it's not something that's going to break the metagame. So Armor is still very, very effective to roll. And then I have Protection from Elites, but someone that actually wants to min-max this build fully should roll Flat Health there or Exotic Damage Resilience. In the mod slots, I have all stamina with armor. That's allowing me to achieve this insanely high toughness, which is the baseline, and I actually have much more toughness than this in any sort of relevant PvP fight. All of my mods are actually going to be stamina with armor, just to save some time. Moving on to my backpack. Now, I do not have performance mods in this backpack. The reason for that is there's a lot of diversity. You can run whatever skills you want. You can have first aid with self-heal and booster shot, but outside of that, you can run anything that you want. You can have pulse with conceal and augment that with performance mods. You can run, performance mods that give you increased personal, self-heal on your booster shot. You can run mods that augment smart cover. There's so much diversity there, and there's a lot of potential with all the different, pieces of gear, all the different performance mods in particular, how they augment skills, and all the different, you can have burst damage with your Seeker Mine. So that's one area where it's very diverse, and you can pick and choose, and it's user's preference for sure. Moving on, I have Stamina mod with armor again, and then the talent that I'm running on this backpack is specialized. 200% of firearms and stamina to skill power. Now this is really important to note because I have very high stamina and fairly high firearms. I have not spec'd into electronics at all. But with 7,000 stamina and almost 5,000 firearms, that equates to about 12,000 between the two of them. Multiply that by 200%, and that reaches about 24,000 skill power just from the specialized talent. This is a very efficient backpack, and you want to be running this to make your booster shot that much more powerful while running vigorous. Moving on, we have our gloves. I've already covered these, but just to address it again, this is what the build is based around. Damage increased by 16% when no gear set bonuses are active. LMG damage, critical hit chance, critical hit damage. Weapon damage of the gun type of your choice. I would recommend the MG5 right now because it's blatantly overpowered, but that's a whole different can of worms, and we'll get into that later, in a different video entirely. But that's pretty much the right roll for whatever you want to be running for a weapon, of your choice, whatever you're comfortable with. And then you have your mask. Now, I've chosen to run Tenacious. I have a great stamina roll on this mask. 10% damage for 10 seconds when using a medkit, again, is just going to increase your primary DPS. In bursts of extremely efficient 10% weapon damage, values, you're going to be able to have much higher damage while mitigating, with certain talents such as critical save. Tenacious is a very strong talent, both offensively and defensively. It's something I would urge you to run, and since you are making sure to not check off any gear set talents, this high-end talent in particular is very, very, very strong. I would recommend 3.5% or more critical hit damage on your major attribute slot, and then for the minor attributes, you can get something like shock resistance if you don't like shock turrets, or burn resistance if you don't like flame turrets, etc., but that's the least important. Another stamina mod with armor. Like I said, every single mod is stamina with armor. Moving on to my two pieces of gear that are not high ends and are actual gear set pieces, but are not, checking off any talents. I have a Lone Star holster with high rolls across the board. I would urge everyone out there to always try and look for 1,250 plus on all three rolls. But 1,200, mid 1,200s to high 1,200s across the board. That would be a god roll. Now, major attributes, that is going to be armor. That is still something you're going to roll every single time on a holster unless you're going for a dedicated pistol build, but that's for a future video. Right now we have high firearms, high stamina, high electronics, and armor. That's a perfect holster. Now we have our knee pads. These are not rolled very well. They could have much higher firearms, over 100 extra firearms from that if we were to be able to roll it higher. And then major attribute, we have armor there. That is the most important thing, having armor in the major attribute slot. For the minor attributes, if you want, bleed resistance or burn resistance or shock resistance, that's up to you. But that's kind of the least important on the knee pads for sure. Again, I have a stamina with armor. Now, moving on, I have the MG5 as my primary weapon. Now, the reason for this is that it has damage to targets out of cover, which is very, very strong. That's the best type of intrinsic talent on guns. The second reason for this is because it has extremely high RPM, which is just really, really good considering the fact that it's an LMG and has this great, built-in, baked-in talent of percent damage to targets out of cover. Another thing is that it has competitive magazine size, so it can get up to about 100 if you mod it correctly. And outside of that, as if we needed any more reasons, you have extremely high base damage. So that's going to scale very well with the 16% from the Skull's MC gloves, and that's going to scale even better with the non-factored in meter bonus of 14% damage to targets out of cover. So the MG5 is blatantly overpowered right now. That's my personal opinion. I'll be making a whole different video on that as well in the future. There's no end to the amount of content I'm going to be producing. But right now, that's what we're going to be running for this build in particular, especially because it factors in very well the percent weapon damage bonuses. Now, for talents, I would say that Destructive is still valuable. It has cross PvP and PvE utility now because enemy armor damage is factored into PvP in the Dark Zone, so that's quite good. However, it's not anything that's game breaking. It's just slightly valuable, and it's not useless anymore in the Dark Zone in terms of going up against players. Unforgiving is extremely powerful. Missing health segments increase your damage. One missing health segment is 10%, two is 25%. This is huge, especially because you are so tanky, and I'll demonstrate even further in a second how tanky you can become. You can reliably let yourself enter the last health segment and proc the 25%. That's very easy to do. And when you are doing that, this build becomes unreal. You can face trade with every single build I've encountered to date, no problem, and you will outdamage them. Extremely, extremely strong. Something like Vicious in the third slot is fine. Critical hit chance is very valuable with a build like this, especially with the high base damage. But I would urge people to have something like Competent in the third slot. Again, any percentage weapon damage bonus you can get is very, very powerful. For mods, you just want magazine size, critical hit chance, rate of fire. That's the optimal combination on the magazine. Outside of that, just getting headshot damage wherever you can is really, really good. And then reload speed doesn't hurt either. Moving on to my talents and my skills in particular, I have a booster shot mod on my actual personal heal. That's because I have vigorous, and it is relevant because I actually have such high skill power based on specialized, so that's very important to note, as well as the fact that you could augment this with performance mods if you chose to. Again, this build is just a template and a showcase. It is not necessarily something that's fully min-maxed. It's just showing what the new gear pieces are and what you can do with them. And then I am right now choosing to run Smart Cover with the Recharger mod. This gives you a lot more damage resistance, about 20% all damage resilience when you are in that Smart Cover. Again, just contributing to how tanky you can become. But you can easily run something like Pulse with Conceal. That will actually boost your damage output, considering you're already tanky enough. You could definitely use to have more damage. I mean, you can never have enough damage. The MG5 is already stupidly overpowered, but you can use Pulse and then get more crits, and it just makes you even more relevant from just a straight DPS standpoint. And you could honestly run something like a Seeker Mine if you augmented it with your different, performance mods as well for more damage or explosion radius. It has very, very high damage to begin with, and then if you modded it with Cluster Mine, you could get a lot of damage. You could get staggers off, you could have CC, and you have high skill power based on specialized to be able to run that. So there's a lot of diversity, there's a lot of potential with this build, and you can run a variety of things. Moving on to the talents, you have Tactical Advance. Now this has been nerfed. It's 2% per meter covered for 5 seconds now, not for more than that, and that's actually a very, very substantial nerf. But again, it's a large amount of percentage weapon damage bonus that you can proc quite easily. You're going to run On the Move because you can easily kill downed agents with your MG5 while hip firing and running in a circle, and that bonus, 30% is going to be huge. I can achieve upwards of 1.8 million effective toughness rather easily, but I'm not going to advertise the build as constantly having that because that would be probably clickbait, and a lot of people would call me out for that. Its baseline stats are a lot lower than that. And then for critical save, you're always going to be running this because 40% for 10 seconds when you use a medkit at low health, which you're going to be allowed to do very easily because you can time it no problem based on your effective toughness as a baseline. You're going to receive 40%, and that's a huge deal. It's going to make you very, 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 very tanky. Extremely tanky. And then Combat Medic when you're in a squad, always, but if you are not in a squad, you're going to want to run something like Critical Save. Because what that's like Strike Back, Strike Back, because that's going to allow you to have 20% decreased cooldowns very efficiently. Again, you're going to be able to allow yourself to reach low health and then proc Strike Back. And that allows you to use a booster shot more frequently with higher mitigation and higher damage. So just to note right here, my baseline stats are 460, 316, and 108. If I pop Booster Shot, which I'm going to be doing very frequently over the course of the fight and is active for a very long duration, as you can see, it's not even half gone yet. I am now going to have 541,000 effective toughness, 357 on the meter, and 108,000 skill power. If I do enter cover and use something like Smart Cover, you're going to see that my toughness goes up even further. This is without Booster Shot. I have 573. There's a lot of different reasons why this build is much stronger than the stats that are advertised on your meter. Not to mention the fact that on the primary DPS meter, you are not going to see something like 14% damage to targets out of cover. So this is actually 14% too low because this is conditional damage that you're only going to get typically against players in PvP. So this should be much higher. Overall, the build is extremely powerful. Using something like Pulse, your damage goes up. You have very high RPM. The gun is fairly easy to control. If you do mod it for stability, that will help, but the longer you fire an LMG, the more stable they become. Once you're proccing both bonuses at the same time, I'm going to put Smart Cover down here, and then I'm actually going to throw a Booster Shot. You're going to see that I achieve 706,000 toughness for a long duration while in cover, and 357,000 on the primary DPS meter. This build is extremely powerful. This is using pretty unique mechanics, considering that I have a named gear piece here, the Skull's MC Gloves, to achieve a lot of toughness. You can spec almost exclusively into stamina while still having a tremendous amount of damage. This is a very efficient build. I do not have any gameplay for you, so if you want to see that, there is a great deal of it available in our live stream, which will be uploaded later tonight. There's a lot going on with that. There's a lot of dynamic encounters. If you pop a tactical link, it's off the charts. The MG5 is very strong as a gun type in general, and hopefully this build right here showcases not only these Skulls MC Gloves, but a potential build based around them that is very, very efficient. A super tank build that has a lot of primary DPS and still relevant skill power while utilizing a variety of diverse and potentially, super fun mechanics for skills in terms of both Smart Cover or maybe a Seeker Mine or maybe a Pulse and your Booster Shot to become a very competitive build. I'm looking forward to the diversity that comes with patch 1.5. I'm really, really looking forward to it. As you can see, I'm getting the 4 Booster Shot, very high crits. Then I'm getting about 74,000 there. Very high RPM. Really, really competitive build. So I would urge everyone to check this out, to try it out. And if you have, really, really awesome stories that come from the Dark Zone PvP surrounding this build, send them to me. Let a mod know on Facebook or something like that, because I'd be really interested to see. And I'd also be very interested to see everyone's builds that are surrounding these named items that are now dropping in the 1.5 PTS. I'm sorry for rambling on. That was a lot of talking. I do understand that. I'm sorry that I don't have any gameplay for you, but there is a ton of it in our live stream, so check that out if you're interested. But I think that the stat points speak for themselves right now. Just for anyone that's wondering, before I get a whole slew of comments, I am in World Tier 5. This is World Tier 5, and these are my stat points. If you're wondering about my character sheet, let me mouse over that really quickly. I can actually show you right now. I have mitigation of 53.74 at 12,846 armor. This is an extremely powerful build. I really don't have enough words to describe how powerful this is. If I'm able to go on solo manhunts in our live stream, and you can check that out, it'll be uploaded later tonight. If I'm able to kill people and go on solo manhunts, and I am not that good at PC PvP at all, then the gun or the build is something that has been done right and is very, very powerful. So again, check that out if you're interested. If you want to support the channel, please check out the links below. I am very sorry that I rambled on for this long, but hopefully it was a good showcase of the interactions between mechanics, a good showcase of a potential template for a build, and then also these Skulls MC gloves, which are a really cool named gear piece that are dropping in 1.5, and I'm excited to see what comes and the diversity that emerges surrounding this piece of gear. P.S. Don't forget to check out I Am Chappie's content on Twitch. He was very, very gracious enough to host us tonight. There was a lot of people in chat. It was a pleasure to see all of them. It was a really fun time, and I definitely wanted to reciprocate when possible. It was really great to see, and if you like our content, you're definitely going to like his as well. So check that out. There will be a link to his Twitch channel down in the description below. So thank you for watching, guys, and as always, have a nice night.